Warning: the following program contains racially sensitive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
So here is how we're going to proceed tonight. We actually have two events that we've put together. The first is we're going to have students from James Madison High School talking about their the Capstone project, and we've titled that portion of tonight's presentation "Bridging Slavery and Freedom." That should last about a half hour, maybe a little less, and afterwards we'll roll into our keynote. Our keynote lecture tonight is Daryl Davis, and afterwards we're going to have a discussion. For those of you who don't know Mr. Davis, I went on to YouTube to watch one of his most recent talks, and he had over 12 million hits. So it's really fascinating. So I'm super excited that students from our local high school are presenting tonight, and I am super excited that a nationally renowned speaker has come to our community to talk about these important issues. So with that, let me introduce Christina Palo, who's on the faculty of George Mason High School, and James Madison High School, and she is going to introduce our students tonight. So Christina Palo, I know her, started working with her last year with Liberty Amendments Month. She helped us through the Honor Society at James Madison to put together the Liberty Amendments Month flashcards that you saw outside of the community center when you walked in. She is on the faculty and teaches history and social studies. She's also in charge of the Social Studies Honor Society at James Madison High School. And one of the classes she teaches is African American history, which takes us to the Capstone project. So with that, Christina, I'm going to ask you to come up, introduce the students, and then facilitate the Q&A afterwards. Let's please give her a round of applause.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. So the African American History course started as an elective by the state of Virginia after the 400th anniversary of 1619, which was when Africans first arrived into the English colonies here in Virginia, and that was in 2019, obviously. I had to write down the math there. I teach history, not math. So we also had the racial strife of 2020, and former Governor Northam created a commission to study how to improve the teaching of African American history in Virginia public schools. And one of their recommendations was the creation of this course, African American History, which studies African American history all the way from colonial Africa, pre-colonial Africa, to today. So last year was the very first year that FCPS offered the course, and we were designing it, flying the airplane or creating the airplane as we were flying it. And one of the requirements of the course is a capstone project instead of an SOL exam or something like that. So we do a deep dive into American slavery, into Reconstruction and civil rights. We ended with a unit on celebrating Black culture. And the capstone project was to create a proposal for a memorial for someone or something within Virginia African American history. That was really their only limitation, was it had to be related to Virginia and it had to be related to African American history. And we wanted to do a memorial because so often we remember history by the memorials that we create. And we want to create and honor the history that has often been not taught or forgotten or overshadowed by other events. So the students worked all year doing research in pairs of two or in teams, and they presented in May. And so what you're going to hear tonight are two of the presentations that were done in May. All of our students did an absolutely fantastic job with this project, especially as we were kind of creating the project throughout the year as we were going. And these two pairs of seniors who just graduated volunteered to present today. So our first presentation is going to be on George W. Johnson by Devin Almquist and Faith Boyer, and I'll let them introduce themselves more. And then our second presentation is called Reforming the Robert E. Lee Memorial, about the Syphax family by Kara Rosmiel and Nima Sala. So, Devin and Faith, would you please come up?
Hi, I'm Devin Olmquist. We just graduated from Madison, and next year I'm going to Louisiana State University for elementary education.
Hi, I'm Faith Boyers. I'm going to Virginia Tech next year for elementary education.
So we did our project on George W. Johnson.
So George W. Johnson was born into slavery October 29th, 1846. His actual birthplace is unknown, but it was in the rural Loudoun County area, somewhere on a Virginia plantation. As a result of him being born into slavery, there's very little known of his childhood and his life before the information that we gathered, which we'll explain later. So he is the first African-American recording artist to sell his records commercially in the United States. He moved from Virginia to New York City to pursue his musical career, which is where we get all of our information. Most of the stuff from Virginia is highly unknown. He rose to fame really quickly, but technology moved faster than he could, so then he kind of fell off the face of the planet, which is why no one really knows who he is. He died of pneumonia at age 67, living penniless, 1914, in his Queens apartment. And he's buried in an unmarked grave in Queens, New York.
Okay, so for the reason that the technology moved faster than he did, at this time to produce music, he couldn't just like copy a CD. Every time he wanted to sell something, he had to re-sing it every time. So he had 2 songs. The Laughing Song was the one that we could find. And then what was the other one? It was so they're kind of like quirky music. So there's a lot of whistling, laughing in the songs. Just a very upbeat, happy music that he produced.
Just a note, so his music was almost like something like a street performer, and a lot of the phrases he would use, while they're not offensive to any specific group, they wouldn't be something that would be socially acceptable now, but that's what a lot of Black singers had to like incorporate into their songs to be accepted and make money, because that's what was popular back then. So just a possible trigger warning, but the song we chose shouldn't have any of that. You're gonna be able to actually hear the Laughing Song, but one of his others is a little bit, yeah. Yeah.
The Laughing Song by George W. Johnson. As I was coming around the corner, I heard some people say, "Here comes the dandy darky, here he comes this way. His heel is like a snowplow, his mouth is like a trap, and when he opens it gently, you will see a fearful gap that I laugh." I got Daddy from Larry. I got Daddy from Larry. They said his mother was a princess, his father was a prince, and it's been the apple of their eye, he had not been a queen. But he'll be the king of Asgard, sweet by and by. That's what I heard them say, why I laughed until I cried, and then I laughed. I got Daddy from Larry. I got Daddy from Larry. So now, kind friend, just listen to what I'm going to say. I've tried my best to please you with my simple little lay. And now whether you think it's funny or a quiet bit of chaff, why, all I'm going to do is just go and with a laugh and then I laugh. I could not help from laughing. I could not help from
So a little bit of more information about the technology that was used to make his music. As Devin initially said, every song had to be re-recorded, so he had to sing his songs tens of thousands of times to sell all of his records. They were played on with Edison cylinder phonographs, and phonographs are like a really early version of a record player. And each song sold for about 20 cents, and he sold about 25,000 copies of his songs in his lifetime. And over time, technology did outpace him. They figured out how to just copy things and make vinyl records that were a lot faster, cheaper, easier to make, made more sense instead of re-recording every song. And then along with the NAACP not loving all of his lyrics, he kind of just was washed out, and then people forgot about him.
Okay, so why we want to memorialize him is because he is the first African-American Black artist. So we, to make commercial records, there's a lot. If you look up any, other, whoever the first one was, you'll find a lot of other people that weren't as, legitimately the first one to make a record. So, and as we said earlier in our presentation, there's not a lot you can find about him, so especially from his earlier life. And so we think that if we memorialize him, we can somehow find a way to learn more about his history.
So a couple months ago, I think in March or April, over our spring break, we went to go see the African American History Museum, kind of to get a feel for where we would want his plaque to go, because we envisioned a plaque with a little bit of information about him and maybe one of his records, if it's possible to find one. Because a lot of people in our class did things in the locations, but because his actual birthplace is not really known, just the general area, and the fact that no one would go out to see it, it would be really hard for him to get any recognition, so the memorial would be basically useless. And there is this one section that we found within the time frame of the late 1890s to the early 1900, exactly 1900, 1901. There was a little bit of music, and we took pictures of where we would want it to go. That space in the bottom, right next to those two men in the top hats, is exactly where we found it be perfect, because there was nothing there. And just as I said, a picture of him, a little bit of bio about it. I don't know if we could find one of his records or anything that he used to make his music, but that's kind of our rough plan. Okay, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Nima Saleh. I just graduated from Madison High School. It's crazy that I can say that now. And I will be attending UVA in the fall, and I hope to study biomedical engineering.
I'm Kara. I also just graduated from Madison. I'll be attending Radford University in the fall to study psychology, probably. And this is our project. We decided to do the Arlington House, otherwise known as the Robert E. Lee Memorial. And do you want to?
Yeah, so Kara and I are both very into steering away from the Eurocentric view that we're often taught history. So we're very grateful for this African American history class where we were able to learn the truths of history. And for our capstone, we compiled a proposal for reforming the Robert E. Lee Memorial up in Arlington. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is a brief overview of what we're going to cover. Kara's going to talk a little bit about the history of the Arlington House, which is now the Robert E. Lee Memorial. They're interchangeable. We'll talk about the Syphax family, highlighting them as a slave family that labored at the Arlington House, but we also want to talk about their influence and their success beyond just laboring at the Arlington House. And then lastly, we'll explain our proposal for reforming the memorial.
All right, so this is just title side. You can go. So first, just obviously, we all know about the American slave system. From the nation's founding to the end of the Civil War, it plagued the southern states. African Americans were stripped of their natural rights and abused for economic gain, and even the nation's leaders took part in perpetuating this institution. Next slide. So first I want to talk a little bit about Robert E. Lee and slavery and how it was involved in his life, or how he was involved in slavery. So he actually grew up on a wealthy plantation in Stratford Hall, Virginia, where his family had a large population of enslaved workers. He, even after diminishing much of their property and financial resources because they had a little bit of economic trouble, so they had to sell a lot of things, they still chose to maintain their enslaved populations.
You can stand closer to the mic. That would be great.
Okay. Thank you. There is no official record of Lee owning slaves himself prior to his marriage, but there are a few references in letters that he wrote to his brother, and those are made to a Miss Sally Diggs, a Mrs. Nancy Ruffin, 3 illegitimate pledges, and most primarily an elderly man known only as Nat or Nate. So we're not exactly sure if these are slaves that he owned, or if it's something else entirely. We just can't really be sure. Okay, so the Custis family. This is the main guy that we're going to be talking about. This is George Washington Parke Custis. He was a plantation owner, author, and playwright. His father, John Parke Custis, was the stepson of George Washington himself. He built the Arlington House as a memorial to George Washington originally. And he and his sister actually grew up in Mount Vernon in the presidential household of George Washington. He married Mary Lee Fitzhugh, with whom he had 4 children, although only 1 daughter survived to adulthood, and she later married Robert E. Lee. So just a little bit of background information about the Custis family, slavery, and Robert E. Lee, and how they're all linked. George Washington Parke Custis was speculated to have fathered a lot of mixed-race children, so illegitimate children, as many as 40 in the area. Yeah. And his white daughter, Mary Anna Randolph Custis, could have had as many as 40 mixed-race siblings in the D.C. area. Robert E. Lee eventually married Mary, tongue twister, in June of 1831. And Mary was his only surviving daughter, as I said, so Lee set himself up to inherit basically the entire Arlington House and all of its resources. So George Washington Parke Custis died in June of 1857, and this isn't in the slides, but it was in our paper, because we also wrote a paper about this subject as part of the Capstone project, and his will actually stipulated that all of his enslaved people be released within 5 years of his death. And Robert E. Lee, having inherited the Arlington House and all of its debt and accumulations that George Washington Parke Custis had amassed during his lifetime, actually made several attempts to petition the town to extend that deadline beyond the 5 years because he wanted to utilize the enslaved workers to rebuild and repay the debts without actually having to pay for work. So just a little fun tidbit. So Again, there were 189 people enslaved there at the time that he inherited the estate. So it was a significant amount of people that he was attempting to keep in slavery for longer than the will stipulated. Go ahead. Oh, go back one. Go back. Oh, did I not? Okay, never mind.
Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to briefly talk about, this is a picture of the Arlington House. It should have been much earlier in the presentation. We're sorry about that.
There was an extra slide. Can I just go?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. There was supposed to be an extra slide in there. I don't know what's going on. But there was one that talked about, so Robert E. Lee, in my opinion, there are many atrocities that slave masters committed, obviously, but one of the most egregious, in my opinion, is the breaking up of the families, because obviously that was all enslaved people had, was each other. And Robert E. Lee actually broke up every single family on the plantation except for one, and some of those families had been together since George Washington controlled those populations. So not the best person in the world. But yeah, go ahead, Nima.
Okay, yeah, so this is the Arlington House, now the Robert E. Lee Memorial. It's right in front of the Arlington Cemetery, as you can see. And right now, it was basically originally built between 1802 and 1818, and then it was renamed the Robert E. Lee Memorial in 1925. So now it's a museum. You can go in, they have exhibits about the people who lived there, a lot about Robert E. Lee, a lot of quotes from him.
Some about George Washington, too.
Some about George Washington, yeah. So it's now a memorial on his behalf. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the Syphax family, who, again, next slide, please. They were a family of slaves who labored at the Arlington House, but not only were they enslaved, but they also played big roles within the greater Black community, and they committed their lives to helping their community. Okay, so Maria and Charles were basically the start of the Syphax family. So Maria was the daughter of George Washington Parke Custis. Her mom was an enslaved maid, so she was mixed race. Her location of birth is unknown, but most likely it was either Mount Vernon or the Arlington House itself. Charles was originally enslaved at Mount Vernon with George Washington Parke Custis, and he relocated to the Arlington House with Parke Custis in 1802. So in 1821, Parke Custis allowed Maria to marry Charles, but they were still enslaved and they were required to continue their labor. So just as a general theme within plantations, there was a hierarchy within the slave community. So if you were a house slave, you were considered of higher status because you often had contact with the slave masters and their guests. So that just made you of higher status than the field slaves. So Maria and Charles had high status within the enslaved community at the Arlington estate because they were both house slaves. Maria served as a maid to her half-sister, Mary Custis, who was the wife of Robert E. Lee, and Charles oversaw the dining room.
And just as a little anecdote, the house slaves were often mixed race because obviously the mixing of white blood was considered to make them more, okay. They oftentimes the house slaves were mixed race because they had white blood, so they were considered more pure, yeah, which obviously, but.
Okay, so a turning point in the family was when George Washington Parke Custis sold Maria and her two children she had with Charles at the time to Edward Stabler, who was a Quaker from Alexandria, and the research shows that he most likely freed them. And then once Maria and her two children were freed, George Washington Parke Custis gave them a 17.5-acre plot at the Arlington estate so that she was able to remain with Charles, who was still enslaved. And just as a side note, the condition of children, whether slave or free, was based on the mother only. So Maria was freed, so her children were freed. Charles was, so many people to remember. Yeah. Charles was freed by Custis's will in 1862. Okay, so now we talked about the Syphax family as they were slaves. Now we're going to talk about their influence and success beyond slavery. So both Maria and Charles played great roles at Freedmen's Village, which was a collection of temporary settlements established by the federal government during the Civil War to help newly freed Black Americans get on their feet. There were hospitals, churches, schools, and it turned into a vibrant Black community. And Maria and Charles played great roles there in helping their fellow Black Americans get back on their feet, like I said, and adjust from slavery to freedom. There are still descendants of the Syphax family around today, but we are going to talk about two notable examples of the Syphax family. So I didn't mention this earlier, but Maria and Charles, after her first two children, she had 8 more children with Charles. So there were 10 children in total. So the family really expanded. So William Syphax was one of the children of Maria and Charles, and he really focused on education for Black Americans. So he was appointed to the, at the time, DC Board of Trustees for Colored Public Schools. Colored Public Schools, sorry, you didn't hear that. And he really worked extensively to promote education for Black Americans, ensuring they had equal opportunities. And he established a college preparatory high school in a church basement, which eventually became Dunbar High School for African Americans. So he made a lot of progress in education for Black Americans. Another one of their descendants, Evelyn Syphax, who was much later in the 1900s, she also focused on education. She established the Syphax Child Care Center in Arlington, which was a preschool for African Americans. And she also fought for a historic marker for Freedmen's Village, which you can see now, it's up there. It has a quick synopsis of what the village was and its significance, and that was achieved in 1995. So much later, but it is there now, and it's very important that it's there because it's a great place to remember.
All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about what we decided would be a good plan for the reformation of the Robert E. Lee Memorial. So currently, as we said, the Arlington House serves as a memorial for Robert E. Lee and occasionally George Washington. There are some parts of the memorial that highlight the enslaved workers that toiled there, but in our opinion, not enough. Isn't there an extra slide? I think that's. Okay, so basically, what is going on? There should be an extra, shouldn't there be an extra slide?
I double-checked, it's the same as the Google Slides.
Okay. Well, there was like a map up here of the memorial. Is that the next one? Okay. Sorry, my bad. Anyway, this, you can go to the next one. So our plan mostly revolves around changing just the general narrative of the memorial. So removing quotes that idolize Lee and his moniker as the kindly General Lee, because we obviously just debunked that. He wasn't really all that kindly. The memorial itself should be referred to as the Arlington House instead of the Robert E. Lee Memorial. The rooms in the house that are currently dedicated to Lee should be renovated in order to center the enslaved workers more, because there were some renovations. Originally, it didn't really talk about the enslaved workers at all, but amidst the racial strife of 2020, there were a lot of pushback, like for all monuments across the nation, and there were some renovations that did include more about the Syphax family, not particularly them, but just more about the enslaved workers. But they are only in the slave quarters. They're not actually in the main house. So if you go to the map, yeah, so you can see the quarters are in the back of the main house, and there are some like quotes and plaques there that do talk about it, but again, they're in the quarters and not the actual house where they labored. And we also want to include a sort of like map / timeline / family tree of the families that lived there, just more details about them, just including more of their day-to-day lives and what they did and what they contributed to life at the Arlington House as it was.
All right, so to summarize everything that we said, these people had stories and families of their own, and we believe that they deserve to be remembered not for their condition, but for their lives. There's so much information about the Syphax family and their connection to Lee that isn't included in this very house that they helped prosper and build. So as much effort that was put into preserving Robert E. Lee's legacy as a Confederate general and a defender of an inhumane institution, we believe the same amount of effort and more effort should be put into preserving theirs. Thank you.
So those are just two of our fantastic presentations, and so I'm sure you can see how wonderful they all were. Would you three come up? We have time for a quick question and answer session. If there are any questions, please let us know. Yes, ma'am.
So I loved hearing about, thank you. I loved hearing about the investigations you did and your plans. So what is happening with that step? I find it remarkable that the Museum of African American History does not recognize the first Black recording artist. So are you planning to share your research, and similarly with the Arlington House? Are you going to petition or present?
Devin and I had talked about it a month ago, and I think it's probably still going to happen, like maybe trying to get in contact with the museum through emails or whatever to just let them know and see if it's a possibility. His song that we played is recognized in the Library of Congress, so I'm sure that if they pulled information up, they'd be able to put something together, but I don't know how quickly something like that could be put into the museum.
And just to follow up, I wonder, what are your thoughts when you discovered this information, that you had never heard of this, and the museum isn't recognizing it, or that in Arlington, a very progressive community, there is this monument or memorial? What are your thoughts about that and how that has continued to exist today?
Yeah, so just to answer your first question, we never really thought about actually, because the Robert E. Lee Memorial is a national monument, we know that it would be difficult to really reform the entire thing ourselves. We do hope that we can petition, like you said, or at least get something started. We know that it's going to be very difficult because, again, it is a national memorial for Robert E. Lee, but we hope maybe we can start something, a greater movement. I don't know. We'll see. But that is a great idea, and thank you. And then to your second question, I personally did not know there was a Robert E. Lee Memorial, so when I found out that there was one when we were researching, I was shocked because, I don't know, it's just hard to think that there is a whole memorial memorializing a Confederate general, and like I said, someone who defended slavery, an inhumane institution that destroyed so many lives. So honestly, I think for one word to describe, my reaction to finding out that there was a Robert E. Lee Memorial, it was shock. I'd say I was shocked that they had that.
You pretty much covered everything I wanted to say. Question in the back.
Oh,
Go ahead.
oh, is that right? Just a couple of comments. I watched this PBS show on Tuesday nights called Finding Your Roots. Are you familiar with that? And the gentleman who runs that show is able to find out a lot of information about enslaved people by looking at the records of whoever owned them and piecing together the names, especially if you have the first and the last name, which is unusual. So just FYI. But when you were doing your research at the Robert E. Lee Memorial, did you come across anything with the Parks family? Because I happen to know both descendants of the Syphax and the Parks families. And the Parks, Mr. Parks or Miss Parks, Mr. Parks, was the cook. And they are, I believe both families do have some plaques or something in the memorial that do recognize both of them. So did you find anything about or did you just deal with the Syphax?
So our research really focused on the Syphax family, but it is very interesting that there is information about the Park family too, so we definitely do want to look into that. So thank you so much for bringing that point across. But are we focused solely on the Syphax family? But there are so many other, like Kara said, there were 109 enslaved people, 189 enslaved people at the Arlington House, and there are so many that still need their stories to be remembered and taught. But we highlighted the Syphax family. We hope that maybe it can encourage other people and even us to look into more slave families at the Arlington House because there were so many.
I did do, when I was researching, I did the article that I found about the renovations that were made 2 years ago. There weren't any details about what renovations were actually made, so I didn't know if there were any like specific families that were honored in the quarters, but I'll definitely look into that because that's really interesting. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, we have time for just 2 more questions. I have one back here, and then we'll pass it on to one more.
Thank you very much for that. I do know the Syphax family descendants. They are local. I think it would be very interesting if the teacher could bring them in next year so they can hear your research. And you can find information about them online frequently, but they are a terrific family. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all so much. Great research. It was wonderful. Ms. Palo, I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful work you did with this course. Really great job. Where do you see it going in the future? Is it being offered again as an elective? Are you going to do things differently? Keep with the Capstone project? I'm just curious what you might do next with this.
So as per former governor's order, I guess, we are required to offer it. The schools only run courses, elective courses, if they have a certain number of students sign up, and I believe this upcoming school year, we have 14 signed up. So a smaller group than this past year, but it is still continuing, and so hopefully it will continue in the future and grow. But it is hard at Madison because we do offer so many electives, and students are only able to take, 8 classes, 7 classes? 7 in the homeroom.
It depends on if you take online classes.
And it depends on online classes, and so.
Yeah, if you have full year, half year.
So there's a lot of complications that limits how many we can offer. We're definitely going to be continuing with the Capstone project. We thought about expanding it a little bit to allow for any other big questions that students have instead of just memorializing. So we might kind of offer the 2 options, but we're absolutely going to consider it. And it was hard designing it because I was learning as I was designing the course and with Mr. Walters, who was our team teacher. And it was the hardest thing was deciding what to include and what not to include. And so I think that there's always things we read the narrative of Frederick Douglass, and so could we do that, or should we do an autobiography of Malcolm X, and we watched Selma, or should we watch something else? And so it's we'll be playing with it, but it's continuing. Is that it?
There is one more. Do we have time for one more?
We gotta go. Okay, thank you.
So on behalf of the Leadership Amendments Month Committee, I want to thank the faculty and the students at James Madison who continue to support this effort. It's not easy to do substantive research, and it's certainly not easy to speak in front of a crowd of about 80 people. And I think the students just did a magnificent job, and they represent our community well. Before I introduce our next speaker, I do want to recognize Councilmember Ray Brill, who came in just as I was doing introductions. Councilman Brill, thank you for being here. And on that note, I want to thank Holy Comforter Episcopal Church. The church has really stepped up for the past 2 years to support, to embrace the whole idea of Liberty Amendments Month. And without their support tonight, Daryl Davis would not be here, and he is a nationally renowned speaker. And so with that, I'd like to invite Reverend Ann Gillespie up to the podium to introduce Daryl Davis, who's going to present his lecture, How Can You Hate Me When You Don't Even Know Me? So Reverend Gillespie, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. What an amazing evening. Thank you, students. Are they all gone already? Okay, well, thank you. Just extraordinary. What exciting work. Oh, my goodness. So my name is Ann Gillespie. I do serve at Holy Comforter up on Beulah with John Strand, who got interviewed before and introduced, and Jackie Thompson. I was first introduced to Daryl through a mutual friend who is also here tonight. Susan, where are you? Right there. And I invited Daryl to come speak at my former parish in Alexandria. And he was such a hit there that it was just a matter of time before I could get him to come to Holy Comforter, and then COVID happened. So when COVID started to let up last fall, we got Daryl there, and people were so moved and so excited about his message. We keep trying to think, what else can we do? And when Liberty Amendments decided to happen again, we thought, let's bring him to the town of Vienna. And we hope you'll stick around afterwards. There's cookies and lemonade for questions. And we also want to let you know there's flyers there for a program that we offer every year, starting in September. It's on Zoom. And it's a dialogue about race and faith. And so it's called Sacred Ground. And if you're interested, we would love to have you. So pick one of those up. Daryl Davis graduated from Howard University with a degree in jazz. He performs nationally and internationally with his own band, and he's worked with such famous people as Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley's Jordanaires and the legendary blues band. But his awesome musical gifts are not why we're here tonight. Daryl spent much of his youth outside the country because his dad was in the Foreign Service. And when he returned to the U.S., he found himself being treated differently because of the color of his skin. This was not his experience overseas, and he found himself very curious about why somebody could hate him without knowing him. And it was that drive to answer that question that has motivated much of his life since then, and in particular what he is going to share with us tonight. So it is my honor to introduce my friend and inspiration, Daryl Davis.
Thank you, Reverend Gillespie. Thank you all. Also want to acknowledge the teacher that brought these fine young students in here to do their exhibits. Kids today are so disconnected from their history, so I'm really, really impressed by bringing these students in here to share that history with you. I'll start by giving you a little bit of background on myself. First of all, I'm age 64, and as Ann pointed out, I'm the child of parents in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I grew up as an American embassy kid, traveling around the world in 1961 at the age of 3, and throughout my formative years. And how it works is, you're assigned to a country abroad for 2 years. You come back home here to the States. You're here for a few months, perhaps a year if you request it, and then overseas again for 2 years, back and forth, back and forth. My first introduction to school was overseas. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all overseas. And my classes over there, my classmates were from all over the world. They were from Japan, Italy, France, Germany, Sweden, Nigeria, Russia, you name it. If those countries had an embassy where we were, all of their kids went to the same school. So that being my introduction to school, that became my baseline, the norm of what school should be. But every time I would come back, this is back in the 1960s, right? Every time I would come home back here to my own country, I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. Even though desegregation was passed by the Supreme Court in 1954, 4 years before I was born, as you know, it didn't just happen overnight. It took years and years and years for schools to integrate. In fact, right here in Virginia, Prince Edward County shut down the public schools, not for 5 days, not for 5 weeks or 5 months, but for 5 years. Public schools were shut down in order to not integrate. I was born in Chicago. My parents are from Roanoke and Salem, Virginia. My dad happened to have a job in Chicago, which is why I was born there. But anyway, one of the times when I came back, I was age 10 in the 4th grade. If we can show that first slide there. There you go. See if you can find me. That's right, that's me. Okay, age 10, right there. So I was one of 2 black kids in the entire school. Myself in the 4th grade, there was a little black girl in 2nd grade. So, being a big bad 4th grader, I didn't see a whole lot of her, right? So most of my friends, I saw her at recess and lunchtime. Most of my friends were those guys you see in the back. and several of them were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join. So I joined the Cub Scouts, and we had a parade with the Girl Scouts, the Brownies, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, 4-H Club, and some other organizations. I was the only black participant in this parade. The streets were blocked off, sidewalks lined with nothing but white people waving and cheering and carrying on, and my den mother let me carry the American flag. As I'm marching with my fellow Scouts, everything was fine until we got to a certain point when suddenly I'm getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and small pebbles and debris from the street by just a small group of the white spectators off to my right on the sidewalk. As I remember it now, I remember there being a couple kids, maybe a year or two older than me, and a couple of adults who were throwing things. And just them, not anybody else. And because I had no precedent for this, my first thought was, oh, those people over there don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, okay? Because I grew up in today we call that a multicultural environment overseas, right? The word multicultural didn't even exist back then. To me, it was just the norm, right? So it wasn't until my den mother, my cub master, my troop leader all came running and huddled over me with their own bodies and escorted me out of the danger that I realized I'm the only Scout getting hit because none of my other fellow Scouts were getting this special protection. So now I'm wondering, what did I do? I didn't do anything to those people. Why are they doing this? And I kept questioning my Scout leaders, and they kept shushing me and rushing me along, telling me to keep moving, everything will be okay. They never answered my question. So when I got home at the end of the parade, my mom and dad were not present at the parade, and they're putting that, remember the old red sticky stuff called mercurochrome? Yeah, they were putting that on me and alcohol and Band-Aids and getting me all cleaned up and asking me, how did you trip and fall down and get all scraped up? I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. For the first time in my life, my mother and father sat me down and explained to me what racism was. Now, at the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about because that was not in my sphere. I was around people from all over the world. You know, people who didn't look like me, they didn't speak my language, they didn't worship as I did, but we all got along. We worked together, we played together, we had slumber parties, you know? So this racism thing was totally foreign to me. And my 10-year-old brain could not process what they were telling me, that somebody who had never seen me, somebody who had never spoken to me, someone who knew absolutely nothing about me would want to inflict pain upon me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It made no sense. So I didn't believe my parents. You know, I didn't. A lot of my friends had siblings, and they would learn stuff from their older brothers and sisters who had experienced different things, you know, about whatever. I always trusted my parents. If I had a problem or a question, I would go to them because I didn't have siblings. I'm an only child. Well, my folks got it right the first time, you understand? Okay, so, and I always believed my parents because they always told me the truth. But this time, I did not believe them. And to further enforce my idea that they were deceiving me is the fact that the people over here on the sidewalk did not look any different to me than my friends or their parents, or for that matter, my little French friends or German friends or Swedish or Danish or whatever friends I had overseas. So people don't do things like that because of the color of your skin. So as I said, I did not believe them. This was 1968. About a month and a half, maybe 2 months later, that same year, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And many of you here are old enough to remember that. I remember it very clearly. And every major city in this country, right nearby Washington, D.C., Richmond, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Detroit, my hometown, Chicago, Nashville, all burned to the ground with destruction and violence, all in the name of this new word I had learned a couple months prior, racism. So now I understood that what my parents had told me was true. This phenomenon called racism does exist. But what I did not know was why. Why does it exist? And so at that age of 10, I formed a question in my mind, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And for the next 54 years, because I'm 64 now, I have been looking for the answer to that question. So now let's fast forward. I graduated high school, went to college, got my degree in music performance, and now I travel all around the world and all over this country performing. And at one point, after I graduated, country music had made a resurgence. Country music has never gone away and never will go away, but it made a resurgence, it became popular again because of a movie called Urban Cowboy. Yeah, with John Travolta and the Mechanical Bull and all the line dancing. So a lot of the clubs and bars and places switched their format from disco and whatever else, top 40, to country. And I like country music, and country music and the blues are no different. It's the same three chords. They're kissing cousins, yeah. So I'm not lying. So, if you want to work full-time, I joined a country band. And we played all over the area. The band was very popular in Maryland, and I was the only black guy in the band and the only black guy, in most of the places where we would play. Well, there was a place up in Frederick, Maryland, right at the junction of I-70 and 270. And it was the Frederick truck stop. And on the Frederick truck stop property was a motel, the truck stop motel. In the bottom of the motel was a lounge called the Silver Dollar Lounge. Now, the motel is still there. The Silver Dollar Lounge has been closed. Somebody got murdered there a few years back, and so they shut it down. But the truck stop is long gone. It's a Costco now. Anyway, the Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation of being an all-white lounge. Blacks were not welcome. And, there were no signs that said white patrons only or no blacks allowed or whatever, but you knew. And, if you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not always a good combination. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge, only black guy in the whole place. Now, the band had played there before. As I said, they were pretty well established in Maryland, and I had just joined them. So we did our first set of music and took a break. I'm following the band over to the band table, sit down, and I feel somebody behind me come around and put their arm around my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this joint, and I can see everybody in the band ahead of me, so I'm turning around trying to see who's touching me, and it was a white gentleman, I would say maybe 15, 18 years older than me, big smile on his face, and he says, "Man, I sure like your all's music." I said, "Thank you," and I shook his hand, and he pointed at the stage and said, "I've seen this here band before, but I had never seen you before. Where did you come from?" And I explained to the guy, well, yeah, he probably did see them because they told me they had played here before, but this was my first time here. I just joined the band a couple months ago. He says, "Man, I sure like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, I was not offended, but I was rather surprised given the fact that this guy was, at least a decade and a half older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee Lewis's piano style. And I proceeded to tell him that Jerry Lee and I got it from the same place, from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll, rockabilly evolved. "Oh, no, I ain't never heard no black man play like that, except for you." So I'm thinking, okay, well, the guy never heard Little Richard or Fats Domino, same boogie-woogie style. And the guy just totally, shut me down, did not believe that Jerry Lee learned anything from black people. I said, "Look, man," I said, "I know Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis is a very good friend of mine. He's told me himself, where he got this style, who he would go see, and things like that." The guy didn't believe that either. I didn't have these pictures with me at the time. I just don't carry them around in my pocket. But show the next one. This is an early one of me and Jerry Lee. And the next one, a little bit, this is just a few years ago, Billy Joel, myself, and Jerry Lee. So there was no way I could prove to him that I knew Jerry Lee. But I told him, but he didn't believe me. But he was fascinated with me and wanted to buy me a drink. I don't drink, but I agreed to go back to his table and have a cranberry juice. He bought my cranberry juice, I paid the waitress, took his glass, and he clinks my glass, and cheers me. And then he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down with a black man and had a drink. Now I'm completely baffled. Like, how can this be? Because at that point in my life, I had sat down literally with thousands of white people or anybody else and had a beverage, a meal, a conversation. How is it that this guy, that much older than me, had never done that? And I know for a fact that there are black people in Frederick, Maryland. I've seen them. So how is it that he seemed to have missed them all? Well, so innocently I said, why? He didn't answer me. He stared down at the tabletop. I asked him again. I said, why? But, you know, I was naive. And his buddy sitting next to him said, tell him. I said, tell me. He looked back at me just as plain as day, and he said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing at him because I know a lot about the Klan. As a kid, as a teenager, after I had that experience, I began buying every book I could find on black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, anti-Semitism, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, you know, trying to learn about that ideology. And I know a lot about the Klan, and they don't just come up and put their arm around your shoulder if you're black and want to buy you a drink and hang out and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't work that way. So I think the guy is, you know, jerking me around or something. And so I'm laughing. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, flips through it, and handed me his Klan membership card. I look at this thing, whoa, I recognize the Ku Klux Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. This thing was for real. So I stopped laughing. Well, you know, it wasn't funny anymore, and I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan and some other things. He was very friendly. He was very fascinated with me. He gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him anytime I was to return back to this Silver Dollar Lounge, because he wanted to bring his friends, you know. You know, Klansmen and Klanswomen to see, as he put it, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I'm not sure he called me a black guy to his friends, but that's how he called me to, you know, when he was telling me. And I said, okay, so I would call him every 6 weeks. We were on a rotation with other bands to play on the weekend at the Silver Dollar. I'd call him on Wednesday or Thursday and say, hey man, you know, we're gonna be at the Silver Dollar, come on out. He would come. He would bring Klansmen and Klanswomen. You know, they don't come in their robes and hoods, you know, they came in regular street clothes. And they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play with the band, and then they'd get out on the dance floor and dance to our music. On the breaks, you know, I would make my way over to his table to say hello, thank him for coming. The Klan would be there, and some of them, 2 of them, would get up when they see me coming, and they would move to another part of the room. So the implication was, we don't want to shake your hand, we don't want to touch you, we don't want to talk to you, we just want to look at you, you know, which was fine by me. And I would talk to the other Klan people there. And this went on for a while, and then I quit that band at the end of the year, and I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else, R&B and whatever else was going on. And, you know, I forgot about him, put him on the back burner. It wasn't like, you know, I had a day off and I'd go to Frederick to hang out with the Klan. You know, I didn't do that back then, I do that now. But in any event, I forgot about him. And then one day, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that has been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, it fell right into your lap. And you didn't even realize it. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them and who don't believe as they believe? Get back in contact with that guy and get him to fix you up with the Klan leader here in Maryland, interview that guy, write a book, and then travel around the country and interview other Klan leaders and members and write a book. Because all the books that I have a ton of books on this stuff, were all written by white authors. My book would become the first book written by a black author on the Ku Klux Klan from the perspective of interviewing them face to face. So I decided that's what I would do. I'm gonna skip ahead now. I got back in contact with that guy. I found his number years later, and it had been disconnected. I had to track him down. He didn't have a phone, he had an apartment, and he had moved. And so I went to his home unannounced because I couldn't call him, you know. So knock on his door, and he opens the door, and he goes, Daryl, what are you doing here? And he steps out into the hallway and looks up and down the hallway. And when he stepped out, I stepped into his apartment. So he turns around, comes back in. What's going on, man? Are you still playing? What's going on? I said, yeah, I'm still playing, but I need to talk to you about the Klan. So he had left the Klan at that point, and I asked him about his robe and hood, and he said they came and got it. I said, what do you mean they came and got it? Don't you own your robe and hood? And he explained to me, which I later found out to be true, that when you join, you can buy the robe and hood and the other, the handbook and this, that, and the other, and it's yours to keep forever. But if you can't afford it outright, you can still take it with you when you join, but you put in extra money every dues period until it's paid off. So he had not quite paid off his robe and hood, and they came and repoed it. So, but he said that he had found, he said that he had found the mask that went to the hood, which he could not find when they came to get it, and he needed to return it. And I said, let me see it. He went down the hall to his room, came back, and handed me this mask. And I'm looking at this thing, and I said, do you know Roger Kelly? Yeah, I know Roger. Roger was my Grand Dragon. Grand Dragon means state leader. Imperial Wizard means national leader. And then you have other lower titles. Anyway, so he says, yeah, I know Roger. Roger was my Grand Dragon. I said, well, listen, I need you to hook me up with Mr. Kelly. I want to sit down and interview him. I want to write a book on the Klan. Daryl, I can't do that. Well, why not? I can't take a black man to the Grand Dragon. And I said, well, you're out of the Klan now. He said, it doesn't matter. And he was concerned about my safety and his safety. I had to beg and plead with him. I said, listen, you said you need to return this mask? He said, yeah. I said, give me Roger Kelly's address. I'll go to his house and I'll return it for you. He snatched that thing right out of my hand and said, no way. And I had to beg and plead for about 20 minutes. Finally, he gave me Mr. Kelly's address and his phone number on the condition that I not tell Mr. Kelly where I got it. And he warned me. He said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. Roger Kelly will kill you. And he was very concerned about my safety. This guy genuinely, liked me. And I said, okay. And then he reminded me not to tell Roger Kelly where I got the information. I said, okay. I think he was more concerned about his safety. So anyway, I had my secretary give Mr. Kelly a call. And I told her specifically, now she's white, and I only mentioned that because, not that I care, I could care less what color somebody is. I mentioned it because it's important to the story. I had the phone number. I could have called Mr. Kelly myself. But I figured if I called him, he might pick up in my voice that I'm black and say, I'm not talking to you, click. And my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. So I knew that if Mary, my secretary, called him, he would know that the voice on the other end of the line was a white voice. And he would not automatically assume, because I know the mentality, he would not automatically assume that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they didn't exist at the time. So that might up my chances of him agreeing. And then, of course, once he sees me, obviously he can figure out that I'm black. And he can decide right then and there if he wants to talk to me or if he wants to, walk away or whatever he's going to do. So she understood. I told her, do not tell him I'm black unless he asks. She said, okay. So she called. He did not ask. He agreed to do the interview. He invited us over to his house, but we had to change the date because something came up with me. And I said, well, listen, let's do it at a neutral place. Let's do it at the motel above the Silver Dollar. So she said, okay. So we set that up for a Sunday afternoon at 5:15. Mary and I got there several hours early. Got the room, I gave her some money, sent her down the hallway to get soda pop out of the machine, put it in the ice bucket so it would get cold. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he showed up at this room and saw me, but I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be hospitable and offer him a cold beverage, just like I would offer any of you if you came to visit me. So she got that all set up. Now, the way the room just happened to be, if you people are standing in the hallway looking in the door of the room, you cannot see who's in the room. You have to walk into the room, turn to your right, go around the corner, and the room is back there. So until you come halfway in the room, you have no idea who's in that room. So I took the lamp table and put it in the most obscure corner of the room. Took the lamp off. I had a little black bag similar to this thing here, but not that one, and I had it sitting beside my chair. In the bag, I had a copy of the Bible and I had a copy of, I had blank cassettes and a cassette recorder. I set the recorder on the table, all in hopes that the man would come in and allow me to record the interview. So I had some blank cassettes in the Bible. Why the Bible? Because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, in my reading of the Bible, I've never seen that. So I wanted to be able to pull out the Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right? Right on time. Mary hops up and runs around the corner. I'm seated back there where you can't see me until you come in my room. She opens the door. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. Again, grand means state level. Imperial means national level. Nighthawk means bodyguard, security. So a Grand Nighthawk would be the bodyguard to the Grand Dragon. An Imperial Nighthawk would be the bodyguard to the Imperial Wizard. In walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's wearing military camouflage, the Ku Klux Klan patch, red circle, white cross, blood drop here. The letters KKK right here. Embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here on his hip, he had a semi-automatic holstered handgun. He comes in, comes around the corner, and sees me and just freezes. Well, Mr. Kelly had not come around the corner yet, and he did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short. So he came around the corner and slammed into his back and knocked the guy forward. And so now they both are stumbling around trying to regain their balance, and they're like looking all around the room, and I'm just sitting there like looking at them. And I could read their faces. I knew exactly what they were thinking. They were thinking, did the desk clerk give us a wrong room number? Or is this an ambush? You know, I could see the apprehension. So I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward and I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand, as did the Nighthawk. So far, so good. I said, please, please, come on in. Have a seat. Mr. Kelly sat down. The Nighthawk stood at attention on his right side. And before I sat down, Mr. Kelly asked me if I had any identification. I said, sure. I got him my driver's license, gave it to him. He says, oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring. Now that had me a little concerned. Why is he looking at my street address, right? Is he gonna come burn a cross at my house, or what's going on here? All he needs to do is look at my name, look at my picture, match it to me, and give me back my license. So I did not want to let him know that he had unnerved me a little bit, but I wanted to let him know in no uncertain terms was he to come to my house for any nefarious activity, uninvited. I said, yes, Mr. Kelly. I said, that is where I live, and you live at, and I named his house number in his street. That way I was leveling the playing field. I implied, if you come visit me, I'm gonna come visit you. So, we're gonna confine all this visiting to this motel room. He smiled, nodded his head, and I did not realize that day, it was many months later, that I had been presumptuous. I had no reason to fear Mr. Kelly coming to my house uninvited. It just so happened, one of his members lived right down the road from me, and I didn't know that. Mr. Kelly had to get on my street and go through 2 neighborhoods to get to that guy's house. So he recognized the street. Pure coincidence. Today, that member sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine for committing a hate crime, which is where he belongs. He'll be there for a long time. But I had no idea of knowing that at that time. So anyway, we got on with this interview. And every time Mr. Kelly would say, Mr. Davis, the Bible says, I'd reach down, pull out my Bible. Or my cassette ran out of tape, I'd reach down to pull out a fresh tape. Every time I reach down like this, the Nighthawk would reach up like this. And I understood that, that's his job. His job is to protect his boss. And so he's doing what he's supposed to do. And so I got it. And he never pulled the gun out, he just rested his hand on the butt of the gun. And after about maybe 45 or so minutes of this, he relaxed. I went in and out of the bag, he didn't reach for the gun. He realized there was no threat in the bag. So Mr. Kelly and I are just, talking casually, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, for no reason imaginable, there was a very short, very fast noise. Where I got, shh. That was it. And we all jumped because it did not belong in the conversation, it just came out of nowhere. And because it was so short and so fast, my ear could not discern what it was. So I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. And I knew that Mr. Kelly had made the noise. I didn't know what it was or why he made it. And so I jumped up out of my chair and I hit the table. I'll tell you why in a second. When you fear for your life, I got all this going on in my head. I'm a black guy. This is the head of the Ku Klux Klan in Maryland. One of his members, or former members, told me, don't fool with him, he'll kill you. So I got all that going on in my head. And so that caused me to fear for my life. And when you fear for your life, you go into what's called survival mode. And in survival mode, you will do anything and everything to preserve your life. And there are only about 4 things you can do. Some people, they faint, they pass out, because the fear is so great, their brain cannot process it, and the brain just shuts down, and they fall out. I don't do that. Another thing people will do is their muscles will tighten up and constrict, and they'll ball up like this, and they can't move. People will be kicking them, punching them, whatever. They won't even be trying to deflect the blows. They're like this, paralyzed. That's called paralysis by fear. I don't do that either. Third thing people will do is to run away. That is the best option. As quickly as you can, separate yourself from the source of the fear. Get away from it. Go away. That is the option that I would have chosen had it been available to me. But it was not available to me, because how are you going to outrun a bullet in a motel room? I'm not armed. My secretary is not armed. Only person who I know for sure who is armed is the Nighthawk. I can see his gun. I don't know, Mr. Kelly is wearing a suit and tie. I don't know if he had a weapon up under his suit jacket or not. All I know is I didn't have one, and I can outrun that bullet. So your fourth option is to do what's called a preemptive strike. Get them before they get you. And when I flew out of my chair, I was on my way to dive across that table, grab the Nighthawk, grab Mr. Kelly, slam them down to the ground, and take away the Nighthawk's gun. And when I came up, I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes, because I knew he had done this. And I didn't say one word. My eyes were speaking for me. My eyes were saying to him, what did you just do? His eyes had fixated on my eyes. He didn't say a word either. But I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the Nighthawk's like this, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do, right? Well, Mary was sitting to my left on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs in the room. She realized what had happened, and she began explaining it when it happened again. And we all began laughing. What had happened was the bucket of ice with the cans of soda in it, the ice had begun melting, and the cans of soda were falling down the ice. That was it. So, somebody almost got shot over a melting ice cube. And it's not really funny, but that's the irony of it. But it proves that we all are human beings. We all felt fear of what we were ignorant, of that of which we were ignorant. Ignorance breeds fear. Look, all because some foreign, underscore, highlight, circle the word foreign, entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, yeah, we knew about it, but we'd long forgotten about it. We were engrossed in our conversation. All because some foreign entity entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful of each other. Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things of which we are ignorant. If you don't keep that ignorance in check, that ignorance will escalate into hatred. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred will escalate into destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. And guess what? They may have been harmless and we were simply ignorant. So we saw that whole chain almost unravel to completion. It stopped short just of that last component, destruction. All right? However, everybody in here saw exactly what I'm talking about on August 12th, 2017, 5 years ago, right down the road here in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the Unite the Right rally. I know all of those guys who put on that rally. Some of them have been in my house. I've been in some of their homes. Nasty bunch of people, all right? On August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville, Virginia. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was a lot of hatred in Charlottesville. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction. When a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and attempted to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving that car full force, full speed into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring over 24 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. Ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, we carried on with, let me just say this. I feel, and this is just my opinion, I feel that we spend way too much time in this country addressing this the wrong way. We spend a lot of time addressing the destruction. I say forget about the destruction. Forget about the hatred. Forget about the fear. Those are byproducts. Those are symptoms of the root cause, of the nucleus. The root cause of that is ignorance. If you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. The good thing is this: there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure, which is what these young people that were up here before me were doing. They're providing education and exposure so they can correct things and not fear things, learn things. That's where we need to concentrate our efforts, our energy, our time, and our monetary resources, is in providing more education and exposure and not omitting history, not erasing history or rewriting history. So anyway, we carried on with our conversation, and the thing kept making noise. We kept laughing and carried on. No more problems. I would continue interviewing Mr. Kelly and other Klan people around the country. I'm just going to tell you about Mr. Kelly and one other one today. I would invite him down to my house. He'd come down to my house. He'd sit on my couch. His Nighthawk would sit next to him. Sometimes the Nighthawk would get bored, take out his gun, and twirl it on his finger like this, while Mr. Kelly and I are talking across my coffee table. And this went on for a couple of years. And during that time, Mr. Kelly would come down to my house. I'd call him up and say, "Hey, man, I got to run an errand up there in your country. In your county. I got to drop off a music contract or drop off, whatever. Why don't you come go with me?" He'd say, "Okay, I'll meet you wherever." He always wanted to meet me at the park and ride off of 270. He didn't want me to come to his house. So this went on, like I said, for a couple of years. By the end of the first year, Mr. Kelly was coming down to my house by himself without the Nighthawk. He trusted me that much. And after 2 years, he began inviting me to his house. He got promoted to Imperial Wizard, national leader. He began inviting me to his house. I go to his house. I see his Klan den where he'd have his meetings. I take some more notes, take some pictures, from my book and all that. And then he began inviting me to Klan rallies. So I go to these Klan rallies, watch these people. There's a big 20, 30-foot cross. The cross is wooden, or sometimes have a metal or iron cross, and they wrap it up in burlap. And the burlap has been soaked in what they call Klan cologne, which is actually diesel fuel or kerosene. And all these Klansmen and Klanswomen in their robes and hoods have these torches. And they march around the cross in a big, wide circle. Cross is in the center. And either the Grand Dragon or Imperial Wizard, one of the leaders, will shout, "Klansmen, halt!" And they all stop. Klansmen face the cross. They all turn around. And he'll say, "For my God," and they all repeat, "For my God," and bow. "For my race, for my race. For my country, for my country, for my Klan, for my Klan. White power, white power." Klansmen approach the cross, and they all close in. So here's the cross right here, and they're standing here at the base. Klansmen light the cross, and they drop their torches at the foot of the cross, and whoosh, the thing is aflame. And so I've been to a bunch of these things. I still go to them when I have time. I'm going to show you, next slide here. I've been doing this for about 40 years. This is about 29 years ago here in Maryland. It's towards the end of a rally. You see the fire on the cross is going out. I asked one of the Klansmen if he would pose with me. So he did. Somebody took the picture. This next one is from about 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. This is from the state of Missouri. And again, towards the end of a rally, there's some more Klansmen and Klanswomen there. But at the end, they're like picnic tables where you have hamburgers, hot dogs, and soda pop and all that. So they're all gathered over there. What do I do at these things? Next one. I engage in conversation. I'm a firm believer that a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. Nothing gets resolved without talking about it. When I came on that rally ground, that guy right there you see with the green cross on his mask, he threatened me. To this day, ever since then, he sends me a Christmas present every year. And now he's out of the Klan. This guy here, he was the Imperial Wizard of that group, the guy with the Confederate flag on his sleeve. He had the largest Klan group in the country. His name was Frank Ancona. Frank Ancona and I were becoming very good friends. If he had lived, he probably would have been out of the Klan within a year of that picture. And but however, he was murdered, and I knew him very well. I knew his whole family. I knew the murderer very well. A very, very tragic story. I'm going to show you. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to show you a little clip from CNN, and I want to just let you know up front. It's a little bit graphic, some nasty language, things like that. But this is the world that I live in. It's the world that I work in. All right, it's the real world. CNN knew who I was through music, and they knew who Roger Kelly was through the Klan, and they had gotten wind of a black musician, collaborating with a Klan leader, and they wanted to do a story. So they contacted me and asked me, could they do a story? I said, sure. So they wanted to know when was the next time I was going to a rally. I said, okay, I'll let you know. So I got the opportunity. I called CNN. They wanted to follow me to the rally, and they said, do you think Roger Kelly will even talk to us? I said, I'll do better than that. When the rally is over, I will get Roger Kelly to come back to my house, and you can interview the head of the Klan inside a black man's house. They said, okay. So they followed me 2 hours up the road to this rally, and they filmed the whole rally. When the rally was over, I approached Roger Kelly and said, hey, listen, CNN would like to interview you. Would you come over to my house? He said, yeah. He drove, a couple hours out of his way down to my house in Silver Spring by himself and sat in my basement and interviewed with CNN. And this clip was shown every hour for 24 hours all over the world. I want to show it to you right now, but I want you to pay particular attention to what Roger Kelly says. He says that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been cemented in his mind for years. He goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. But listen to what he says about respect at the end. And here's something that I want to share with you. Between my childhood travels and now my adulthood travels as a musician and lecturer, when you put them together, I have been in a total of 61 countries on 6 continents. I have played in all 50 states. That just means that I've been exposed to a multitude of people. And I can tell you something, no matter how far I go from our country, right here, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, no matter how different the people may be who I encounter, I always conclude one thing, that we all are human beings. And as such, we all want these 5 core values in our lives. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 values, or any of those 5 values, when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation, it doesn't have to be about race, any kind of adversarial situation, or in a culture or society in which we are unfamiliar, I will guarantee your navigation will be much more smooth and much more positive. So listen to Roger Kelly talk about how the ideas of the Klan have been cemented in his mind, and how he believes in separation of the races. The video clip, you got to click it twice.
This is CNN.
Welcome to this final hour of CNN Sunday Morning. I'm Bob Kane, and today for Miles O'Brien.
Good morning to you all. I'm Joey Chen.
Friendship can transcend all kinds of boundaries.
Just look at us. And 2 men in Washington area are showing that even an African-American man and a member of the Ku Klux Klan can find common ground. CNN's Carl Rochelle reports.
Daryl Davis plays a hot piano. It's part of the show, and it makes him stand out. He also stands out here. Davis is one of the few African Americans you will ever find attending a KKK rally. More than attending, he is welcome.
I got more respect for that black man than I do you white niggers out
been a tough day for the Klan. Their Maryland rally found many local residents rejecting the message of white separatism. After it's over, Daryl Davis hangs around backstage with his friend, Klan wizard Roger Kelly. It's not unusual for blacks and whites to be friends, but it is unusual to find a black man and a Klan leader chatting pleasantly over an orange soda after a Klan rally. The relationship started over a book Davis was writing. His secretary set up an interview with Roger Kelly, but didn't tell him Davis was black. They talked and talked some more. Davis learning about the Klan, Kelly learning about Davis.
We get to know one another and we do different things, it hasn't changed my views about the Klan, because my views on the Klan's been pretty much cemented in my mind for years.
Kelly and his Klan friends go to hear Davis and his band. And Davis goes to their rallies.
I sat on the front row and listened to each Klansman speak. Some things I agreed with, other things I did not agree with.
Davis thinks that his presence promotes badly needed understanding.
Hate stems, I believe, from fear of the unknown, and I think this is all across the board, regardless of whether it's a Klansman or anything else.
But he has no illusions about the Klan. If he did, his friend would be quick to disabuse them.
And I believe in separation of the races. I believe that's in the best interest of all races.
Does he really? Or has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
I will follow right man to hell and back, because I believe in what he stands for and he believes in what I stand for. A lot of times we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
The strange relationship of a KKK wizard and his black buddy. In Washington, I'm Carl Rochelle, CNN Sunday Morning.
Strange. Good adjective, strange.
Certainly that.
Okay, so that's the clip. Now, you heard Roger Kelly say that even though he and I would do different things together, it did not change his views on the Klan, because his views on the Klan had been what? Cemented in his mind for years. And he goes on to say how he believes in separation of the races, because he finds that to be in the best interest of all races. But did you hear him towards the end say that he respected me? What's that all about? I'm black. He's the head of the Klan. What he said was, we may not agree on everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me, and I respect him to sit down and listen to him. Those are his words. If you don't take anything home with you tonight, take those words home and apply them. If you have somebody with whom you disagree or disagrees with you, allow them to air their views. Listen to them, because that way they will listen to you, all right? In that one sentence, he named 3 of those 5 values. I said everybody wants to be loved, respected, they want to be heard, they want to be treated fairly and truthfully, and they want the same things for their family as we want for our family. He said that I respected him. That's one of them. He said that I sat down and listened to him. I allowed him to be heard. And then he said because of that, he sat down, he respected me and sat down and listened to me. That's a fair exchange. Fairness, being heard, and being respected. Those 3 values, all right? Now understand something. I'm not a separatist, I'm not a racist, I'm not a nationalist, I'm not a supremacist. I'm none of those things. I did not respect what Roger Kelly had to say. I'm gonna say it again. I did not respect what Roger Kelly had to say. I simply respected his right to say it, all right? And we talk about the 13th Amendment today, but you all know the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. Okay, so I respected what he had to say. As a result of my employing those values, that cement that he talked about, that held his ideas together for years, began to get cracks in it as he began thinking about some of the things that I said. I respected him, I sat down and listened to him. What did he say? He respected me and sat down and listened to me. Treat each other fairly. He began thinking about some of those things I had to say. That cement cracked, it began to crumble, and then it began to fall apart. And then some years ago, Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan and renounced what he had said in that video. When Roger Kelly left the Ku Klux Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. This is the robe of the Imperial Wizard, same one that you saw him wearing in that video. This, of course, is the emblem that all Klan members use, the red circle with the white cross and blood drop. It's called a Mayok or a blood drop emblem. And of course, this is what's called the hood and the mask. This is the hood, this is the mask. Members who want anonymity, they don't want you to know who they are, they wear this mask and they peep at you through these eyelets. So they see you, you don't see them. If they don't care that their identity is revealed, the mask is attached with 3 snaps and Velcro. They just detach the mask and the face is exposed under the hood. And you saw both types in that video clip, okay? A couple other things, you know, I have tons of robes and hoods. I've been doing this now for 40 years. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of stuff. I couldn't bring it all tonight, but this is a rally banner. When they have their marches or their rallies, one of their flags that they fly, okay? And also dealing with neo-Nazis, get some of them to leave those movements as well. And you all know what this is. One of their rally banners. Okay, I just gave you a quick snapshot into what can be accomplished. Boom, boom, boom. But now I'm going to walk you through it real quick, and then I'm going to take some questions, because I know you want some of those cookies over there. So, you know, I mentioned Charlottesville a little bit earlier. We're going to talk about Charlottesville for a second. This next slide here comes from that day in Charlottesville, one of the many incidents that went on that day. What's going on here? All right, this black gentleman here has an aerosol can, and what happened is somebody threw an aerosol can at him, and he picked it up and lit a match or lighter and created an improvised flamethrower. So he's trying to set these people coming down the stairs on fire with his flamethrower. They're trying to beat him with their Confederate battle flag poles, right? Now, they're coming down from the Confederate Statue Park. You don't know it, but all these guys here that you see there are Klansmen. You don't know it because you don't see them in their robes and hoods. You see them in their street clothes. I know it because I know all those guys, all right? This guy right here in the white t-shirt and the camouflage short pants, he's the Grand Dragon of Virginia, all right? So that's what's happening. Now, the Imperial Wizard for that group had already come down the stairs before the guy lit the flame. So he's about maybe right here. Okay, he came down the stairs, he's walking this way. So you don't see him, he's out of the camera shot. And he turns around and he sees what you're looking at right there. He pulls out a gun and he points it at the black guy's head and he shouts, "Hey, nigger," and then he lowers the gun and fires it. And the bullet goes into the gravel right here. Law enforcement had to dig it out of the ground. And then the wizard turns and keeps on walking in the direction in which he was headed, right past the Charlottesville police, who were standing there like this in green neon vests, and they did not do a thing. They watched a man pull out a gun and shoot it, and they did not move. It was for that reason and many other reasons that day that the mayor of Charlottesville fired the police chief, and rightfully so. And because that day they were serving and protecting nobody. So today Charlottesville has a new police chief. Good thing. Now I'm going to show you this clip. And again, excuse the graphics on here, excuse the language. You're going to see the wizard. He is wearing a black bandana on his head, a blue jean vest, and black jeans. Okay, he comes down the stairs and comes this way. All right. There he is. See the police over there in the green neon. Okay, now, what would you do if that were to happen in Vienna? You can't say, oh, no, that doesn't happen in Vienna. That's Charlottesville, it's further down the road. No. It can happen anywhere. Anywhere there is hate. Anywhere in this country. And I'm going to tell you something else, too. You may live in Vienna. You might live in Arlington, Falls Church, Annandale, Alexandria, Roanoke, wherever. But guess what? Charlottesville is also your city. Because if you are an American, this is your country. And if this is your country, every city in this country is one of your cities. So whatever happens in Charlottesville is part of your problem too. No matter where you live. I live in Maryland. Charlottesville is still one of my cities because I'm an American, okay? So what do? Well, let's do what most people do. We blame people. So let's play the blame game. Let's blame the black guy for trying to set people on fire. Okay, he gets some blame, should not have been doing that. Let's blame the Klansmen for trying to beat him or beat somebody with their Confederate battle flagpoles. They get some blame. Let's blame the Imperial Wizard for pulling out a gun and firing it. He definitely gets some blame. Let's blame the police for not doing their job to serve and protect what they're paid to do. They definitely get some blame. But maybe we should blame ourselves for allowing our society to come to this point in the 21st century. This nonsense does not belong in any century, let alone the 21st. But you know what? Sitting around blaming people accomplishes nothing. I blame him, he blames me, we blame her. It just goes around and around and nothing gets accomplished. Keep in mind, our society, our country can only become one of two things. One, it can become that which we sit back and watch it become, or two, that which we stand up and make it become. So you all have to ask yourselves the question. You don't have to answer it to me, you have to answer it to yourselves. Do you want to sit back and see what your country becomes? Or do you want to stand up and make it become what you want to see? Only you can answer that question. I've chosen the latter. I want to stand up and make it become what I want to see. So what did I do? All right, so you saw the Imperial Wizard in his street clothes. Here he is in his Klan outfit. There he is. Okay. I called him up. I said, hey, man. I said, you and I need to get together and talk. Not Klansman to black man, but man to man, American to American. Your Confederate history is just as much a part of my history as my black history is a part of yours. It's all American history. Let's you and I get together and explore American history. I talked to him for about 20 minutes on the phone. He agreed. So we set a date. He gave me directions to his house. I drove by myself an hour and a half to this guy's house, unarmed. And I sat in his living room, KKK stuff all over the place, all over the walls, statues, this, that, and the other, and Confederate battle flags. I sat on his couch that was covered with a Confederate battle flag, right? And I listened to him for 2 hours. He and his Klanslady fiance give me a lecture on American history, from a Confederate perspective, of course, right? I just sat there and listened. Some things he got right, some things he got wrong. I didn't cut him off, I didn't interrupt. I listened because people want to be heard, all right? When he was done, it was my turn. First thing I did was I corrected him on the things he got wrong, but I also commended him on the things that he got right. And then, rather than me give him and the Klanslady a 2-hour lecture, I said, here, I got a better idea. There's a new museum that opened up in Washington, D.C. called the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. I said, I know somebody there who can get me some tickets, because tickets were very hard to come by. I had a connection. So I said, let's set a date. You and the Klanslady come to my house, I'll get the tickets, and I'll drive you all down to the museum. Let's explore it together. They agreed. So we set the date, I got the tickets, and we went, they came to my house, we hung out in my living room, I put them in my car, we drove them downtown to DC, and we went to this museum. Now here we are entering the world's largest black history museum with the Klansman, the Klanslady, and myself. Look what he wears on his head. Okay, that's the Klanslady there. Now, what did we do in this museum? Next slide. We looked at displays on slavery, on segregation, integration. We watched little video clips on blacks in the arts, blacks in music, in education, in science, in medicine, all that kind of stuff. And now you notice he's holding his fiancée. He loves music. His favorite artist of all time is Elvis Presley. I love Elvis Presley. I'm a big Elvis Presley fan. I saw Elvis 14 times. I met him twice. I went to his funeral. I never played with Elvis, but I played with his band after Elvis had died in some tribute shows. But I love Elvis. But Elvis Presley did not invent rock and roll. My boss invented rock and roll, and I played with him for 32 years. His name was Charles Edward Anderson Berry, better known to most of you as Chuck Berry. And without Chuck Berry, there would be no Elvis Presley. There would be no Beatles, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Ted Nugent, Jimi Hendrix, Elton John, you name them, on and on and on. Anybody who plays rock music, all of their DNA goes back to Chuck Berry. Just like no matter what kind of car you drive out in that parking lot, it all goes back to Henry Ford, okay? So that's my analogy. So anyway, Chuck Berry had donated one of his Cadillacs to the museum. I saw it at Chuck's house, but now it sits in the museum. Anyway, he likes Chuck Berry music, and so he wanted to go see the Cadillac. So you see him holding his fiancée here, but here next is a picture of me working with Chuck Berry. That's the man who invented rock and roll. He's getting ready to go into his duck walk. He's playing Johnny B. Good and getting ready to play that famous guitar solo. And for you young people out there, you all might recognize that from Back to the Future. But that's the original dude right there. Okay, that's the guy who invented it. All right, so we go over to check out Chuck's Cadillac. Here we are. See the Cadillac? Now who's holding his fiancée? You all see how fast I work? All right. So we spent about 2.5 hours in this museum, which barely chips the tip of the iceberg. That place is so vast, even 2.5 months would not let you absorb everything. But I figure 2.5 hours is enough for one day. So we said, let's get out of here. So we leave, and I walk over to the marquee in front of the museum, and I gave the Klan's lady my cell phone camera and said, hey, take a picture of the wizard and me. I asked him, come over here. This is what he did. Totally unscripted. Totally spontaneous. Now, he's come a long ways from, hey, nigger, boom, all right? That is 2 months less than a year after Charlottesville. Charlottesville was August 12th, 2017. This is late June 2018, so almost a year, 2 months shy of a year. He's come a long ways. He still has a ways to go, but at least he's going in the right direction, and that's what's important. This does not happen without dialogue, without the power of conversation. As I've said, a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. So now, this is not the end of the story here. It goes deeper than this. Within a few weeks, he's going to marry that Klan's lady. I've been working with them for almost a year. Guess what? They invite me to the wedding. A black man to a Klan wedding, all right? But it goes deeper than that. The Klan's lady, she is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and her father was too ill to come up to do his duty of escorting his daughter down the aisle and giving her away. Rather than ask one of those trusted Klansmen trying to beat people with their flagpoles to step in as a surrogate father, they asked me if I would escort her down the aisle. Yeah. So there it is, right there, okay? And if you look up in the bedroom, got his Confederate flag, right? Like I said, he's come a long ways, he has a ways to go. But it happens incrementally. It's not like a light switch, just switching on and off. You got to build, all right? So at least he's going in the right direction. Now, I said to him, listen, when I agreed to walk her down the aisle, I said, I want this documented because this has never happened. He had interviewed with CNN long before all this had ever happened. And he had told CNN he was going to be buried in his Klan robe. And I said, I want to call CNN, and I would like them to cover this wedding. He trusts me. He said, okay. He said, just ask CNN not to film the faces of my Klan members because they could lose their jobs, et cetera. I understood that. And so I said, okay. He said that CNN could film his face her face, of course, my face, and the preacher. So I talked to CNN, they said fine. So they came and they filmed it, and they ran what he had said way back when under this little video clip. So here you go.
As you stand in the presence of God,
This time, it was Davis giving something away. Come on. I mean, this friendship is just something very special. She wanted to be a part of this wedding. That's beautiful. That's what she's planted.
Right, that's right. So here you have, there you go, the imperial wizard groom, the Klan's lady bride, and the surrogate father. Again, it does not happen without conversation. We spend way too much time in this country talking about the other person, talking at the other person, and talking past the other person. Why don't we spend a little bit of time talking with the other person? You see what can happen, right? Like I said earlier on the slide, when two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, they're talking. They might be disagreeing, but at least they're talking. It's when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence. So you want to keep the conversation going. Now, I'm going to conclude, and then you'll give you a chance to ask some questions. You know, it bothers me a great deal as an American that we call, you know, ourselves the greatest nation on the face of this earth. Don't get me wrong. I love my country. I'm patriotic. But I do have problems with that statement. Maybe we are the greatest nation on the face of this earth technologically. We, Americans, built the technology to put a man on the moon before anybody else. And while Neil Armstrong was up there walking around on the moon talking about one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, we were able to talk with astronaut Armstrong live from Earth all the way to the moon via satellite radio phone. We, Americans, built that technology. Everybody in here has email. Everybody in here has a cell phone. Type a few words, type a few numbers, hit send. You're talking to people right next door in North Carolina or Maryland or West Virginia or California or Africa or China or wherever you want to talk, anywhere on the face of this planet. We invented that technology. How is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on this planet, but yet so many of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door because they are a different color, a different religion, a different persuasion, a different whatever? It seems to me that before we can call ourselves the greatest, perhaps our technology needs to catch up to our ideology needs to catch up to our technology. And once we get them both up there, then we can truly brag about how great we are. Like I said before, we are living in the 21st century. We are living in space age times. So why are there still so many of us thinking with Stone Age minds? You know, the two CNN news desk anchor people, they implied that I was strange. That's okay. You know what? If strange causes people to give up stuff like this, we all need to be strange. Okay? So thank you all very much. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I am just a rock and roll piano player. I'm being serious. That's all I do, right? That's what I can do. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a psychologist. But if I can do this, anybody can do this. Anybody can talk to people. You know, you don't have to be on the front line like I am, if that's not where you're comfortable. You can be on the back line. You can be on the sideline. You can be online. But be on some kind of line doing something to provide that education, that exposure to others. People on the back line, the sideline, online are just as important as people on the front line. We all have to work together. Because I'll give you one quick analogy and I'll take some questions. Think about your very favorite movie of all time. You can probably tell me, well, of course you can tell me the name of it, and you can probably tell me who starred in it. Maybe you can tell me who the director was, but can you tell me who the cameramen were? Can you tell me who the wardrobe mistress or wardrobe master was? Who set up the props? Who did the stunts? You don't know their names. But guess what? All of those people on the sideline, the back line, behind the camera, are just as important as those ones in front of the camera. And because that movie won however many Oscars it won, guess what? All those people on those lines that you don't see contributed to making that movie great, to winning all those Oscars. So that's what I'm saying. Don't think there's nothing that you can do. You don't have to do what I do, go on the front line, unless you're comfortable there. But be on some kind of line, back line, sideline, on line. Okay, questions? Yes, sir.
I would think the optics of those photos would be pretty bad for the folks in their Klan. How do they explain that to their own people? Oops, sorry. The optics of those photos would be very difficult, I would imagine, for members of the Klan. Mm-hmm. How is it that they see that? When they reflect on those and they see that the CNN coverage, do they have regrets? Do they, because it's a chink in the armor.
Yeah,
and
many of them do have remorse and regrets for it, especially after they've left, okay? Because to hate someone is irrational to begin with. So there's a lot of irrationality going on. And, they realized, that they had learned this from somewhere, either family tradition, or they got mixed up in the wrong group, or they read the wrong book, went down the wrong rabbit hole. There are many different reasons why people, join these movements. One of the biggest reasons is because there's something lacking, and they want to belong. They want to feel that they have, somebody has their back. They want to belong to something, And then when they see all this and they begin reflecting, yeah, they do have, a lot of them do have remorse.
Well, I was thinking actually of a different kind. Like if your mind is cemented in a particular way, and then you in the middle of the interaction, you may catch yourself, you may be caught off guard, right? Having a friendly moment with someone that you're supposed to hate.
Right.
And then you see the picture and you go, what was I thinking? Right. So I'm wondering if there's that kind of remorse. Or just regret, or some explaining to do.
All of the above, because a Klansman or Klanswoman or any kind of white supremacist or black supremacist or whatever, those people are not stamped out of a standard cookie cutter. They come from all different walks of life, have all different individual feelings. But basically, it boils down to ignorance and stupidity. All right. Some people want to define ignorance and stupidity as being synonymous. I don't. How I define it is an ignorant person is someone who makes a bad choice or the wrong decision because he or she does not have the facts or the proper information to make the correct choice or a good decision. If you give that person the facts or the proper information, you have alleviated their ignorance. A stupid person is someone who has the facts, who has the proper information, and they still make the wrong choice. So let's say, for example, let's say I have a room, right? And I paint the walls in the room. The walls are wet. And I don't post signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. Anybody walking into that room is ignorant, as in unaware, that these walls are still wet. And they might go and lean up against the wall. And now they got paint on their clothes, right? So I can cure that ignorance with education. I can put up signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. I can stand in the doorway, tell each person coming in, hey, gather around the center. I just painted these walls 10 minutes ago, they're still wet. So now everybody entering that room has the facts, has the proper information, but still one of them goes and leans against the wall, and now he wants to know why is there paint on his clothes. It's because he's stupid. Okay, so fortunately, there is a cure for ignorance. As I said earlier, it's education and exposure. Unfortunately, there's no cure for stupidity. If you give somebody the education and they don't use it, nothing you can do until they do. Yes, sir. You.
First, I'd like to say thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So you've been doing this for 4 decades, and I'm wondering, do you feel as if people are more open to listening to you now in the age of the internet because we're exposed to so many different ideas? Or do you feel like the people you talk to fall into almost echo chambers and it's made your job more difficult?
Okay, good question. You know, when I first started doing this, people thought I was crazy, thought I was a nutcase, a fruitcake, all kinds of, weird things. How can you sit down with those people? You'll get yourself killed, blah, blah, blah. And now those same people who shunned me are now calling me, Daryl, what's going on? You know those people. What are they up to? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, if you'd listened to me 30 years ago, you'd know what they were up to. People are beginning to listen a little bit more now. And I think, despite all the division that we have in our country right now, I will say this. This is the best time right now with all the division, because now it's in your face and you cannot deny it. It has to be addressed. It's sort of like, you go driving down 495 and your car starts knocking and making some weird noise. You're like, oh man, I better get to a mechanic and find out what this is before my car blows up. And when you get to the mechanic, ask him to drive it around the block. He drives around, he says, I don't hear anything. Well, he can't fix what he doesn't hear. So we can fix it because it's in our face. We know who it is, we know what they're saying, we know what they want. So this is the best time to address it. We need to be more proactive now than being reactive. Yes, ma'am. One second, she's going to bring the microphone for you.
We have time for just one more question, so this will be our last question tonight.
Okay, when you were in school in Europe with all of the other children from all over the world, did they identify themselves as white, black, Hispanic?
When I was like in elementary school or
Yeah.
high school, stuff like that?
Yeah, like
No.
in Europe, did they use those labels?
No, they did not identify themselves as that. They were just my friends. I was just their friend.
They were just kids, right?
They were just kids, exactly.
I wish sometimes that I think in this country we may be using these labels just way too much.
Let me just answer another part of that to help you understand what's going on. When I was a child, the black population in this country was 12%. Native Americans, 1%. Hispanic, Latino people, right around 2%. Asians, right around 3%. Whites were like 86, 87%. This country was built on a two-tier society. White supremacy at the top, slavery at the bottom. And as we progressed through the decades, we progressed like this. Maybe like this, but never like this. All right? And now, the census is taken every 10 years. All you have to do is just go to uscensus.gov and you can see the trends, all right? Today, white people make up 59% of the population. Black people are still just over 12%, 12.9 or something. We really haven't grown. Native Americans remain at 1%. Asians have almost doubled, 5.9%, almost 6%. Hispanic, Latino people have more than quadrupled, 17-point-something%. So if you take just black people at 12%, 17% Hispanic, Latino, that's 29% non-white, right there, almost a third, right? And so while there are a lot of white people in this country that don't care, that this thing is happening, because it's very well calculated that in the year 2042, remember that, 2042, this country, for the first time in its history, will become 50-50. 50% white, 50% non-white. And between 2045 and 2050, it's going to flip. And whites will become the minority here. As I said, there are plenty of people who don't care. That's evolution. I don't have any problem with that. But then there is a segment of our population that does have a problem with that. And that's why we're seeing so many racially and religiously motivated mass shootings. Okay, because when I first started this almost 40 years ago, there was the Klan, white power skinheads, neo-Nazis. Now you got the Klan, white power skinheads, neo-Nazis, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Vanguard, the alt-right, on and on and on. And they're all saying, come join us, come join us. We're going to take our country back. We're going to make America great again. We're going to build that wall. We're going to send those people back to where they belong, on and on and on. And people fearing, that their identity is being erased. What those people tell me, and I deal with them every day, they say, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation, race mixing.
But what's the difference? Because we put these labels, brown, black, white.
But see, now they're feeling themselves being erased. You think that, you're old enough to remember the term white flight.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, young people don't even know the term white flight. They have no idea what you're talking about, because the color of the American landscape has changed so much that anywhere you go, there's already somebody there who doesn't look like you. And so they're feeling that squeeze. They feel like they're being squeezed out of their own country. This is the supremacist mentality. Of course, you know it's not true, okay? But they don't. That's what they feel, and that's why they're trying to do all this stuff. So people run and join these groups out of fear of being erased. And what happens is when the group fails to take the country back, they get frustrated, and they say, you know what? If the Klan can't do it or the neo-Nazis can't do it, I'll do it myself. And that's when they walk into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and boom, 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 and shoot up 9 black people doing Bible study, or the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh and murder 11 Jewish people, the Sikh Indian Temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and murder 6 Sikh Indians doing their religious thing in their temple, or the Walmart in El Paso and murder 23 Hispanic people, or the grocery store in Buffalo, New York. These are called lone wolves because they're acting on their own. As we get closer and closer to 2042, unfortunately, we're going to see more and more of these lone wolves. This is why we have to be proactive and start educating people because they're becoming unhinged. We have intelligence agencies that can infiltrate some of these groups. Like, for example, remember last year, the crazy group in Michigan was going to kidnap and murder the governor? We already had intelligence operatives who fit the profile, join that group undercover, gather intelligence, report it back, and that's why that plot was squashed. So while we may be able to infiltrate a group, it's impossible to infiltrate a lone wolf. That's only one person. How do you get inside one person? And every time law enforcement shoots and kills one of these lone wolves, or they take their own life, or they get arrested, law enforcement goes and raids their property. What do they find? They find a cache of automatic weapons that are being stored for what they call RAHOWA, R-A-H-O-W-A, RAHOWA, okay, which stands for Racial Holy War, the first 2 letters of those 3 words, or simply called the race war. That's what they're looking for. Okay, thank you all very, very much.
Yes.
When you get a chance, come by the table here. I have a few things under that I brought to show you. You can come by and feel free to pick them up. I have, these are actual slave shackles. And read what's written on them. And a couple of waiting room signs. Okay, thank you.
Well, on behalf of the Liberty Amendments Month Committee, I want to thank the church for facilitating this event tonight. I want to thank Daryl Davis for giving an amazing lecture tonight, and I want to welcome everybody to the reception, have some lemonade, have some cookies, and let's continue our dialogue. But please give our speaker a big round of applause.